A quick warning, today's episodes contain some terminology and philosophical concept. Just bear with it and it will soon clear up. Hey beautiful people, this is Brian here coming at you at Kobochisawa in Yamanashi Prefecture, Japan. And if any of you have a chance to come to Japan, do not miss out this amazing, beautiful mountain area just full of amazingness and cafes and all good things. And so today, this is episode 24 of Misfits. And this is where I speak to the rebels, the outliers, the unconventionals in Singapore. I'll try to see things as how they see it and to learn from them. Some of these individuals include Donnie Ng, who won the Granby Box Butter Championship twice in a row, Benny Sitio, who's the co-founder of 18 Chef, Adrian Pang, and a whole lot more. And today on the show, we have Tay Keng Soon. He was responsible for many iconic buildings around Singapore, and some of them include People's Park Complex, Golden Mile Complex, and the KK Women's and Children Hospital. He was the president of the Singapore Institute of Architects, the founding member and chairman of the Singapore Planning and Research Urban Research Group, the chairman of the substation, and also the founding member of DP Architects. On the side, he is an adjunct architecture professor at National University of Singapore. In this conversation, we spoke about Keng Soon backpacking experience back in the 1960s, before Singapore Airlines was born. We also talk about him having his encounter with our late Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew. You would want to check out the story, and the relationship between architecture and politics. Boy, oh boy. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tay Keng Soon. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking your time out. I really appreciate this. I've been actually looking at a lot of your work. Firstly, you came highly recommended from Jack. And then after going through a lot of your work, I am very excited to speak to you. This is going to be quite a long interview. That's all right. So let's just get started. So when someone will come up to you, say for example, if they are overseas and they don't recognize you, right? You're overseas, and ask you, what do you do? How do you answer that?
I'm a busybody. Happen to be an architect and interested in all manner of things.
All right. And with every guest on the interview, I like to ask them a little bit about their origin story. If you can take a step at describing your childhood growing up, paint us a picture.
My earliest memory was on December the 8th, when the Japanese bombed Singapore. I was exactly 1 year old that day. That's my earliest memory. I hear the bombs. Yeah, the whistling of the bombs, and then the thud and the explosion. And also the smell of the sandbags, the gunny sacks, the smell of that. So that's very, very early memory. Then biggest influence was going to family evacuated to Cameron Highlands. So we lived in a farmhouse, and it was a glorious time.
Up over in Cameron?
Yeah, up in Cameron's, yeah. Very cold and very natural. We kids were very free to roam around the house. Did a bit of farming. Handled manure with the hands.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And there was a Japanese garrison behind the house, a bit further away. And there were, good guys and bad guys there, right? So the good guy was the guy who gave us sweets. The bad guy was the guy who beat up the neighborhood.
And these bad guys, were they Japanese? Oh, okay.
The terrific memory was the punishment meted out to an Indian thief who was caught by the Japanese, and the whole village, neighborhood was brought around to witness the punishment, and he was severely beaten with a wooden samurai sword. Yeah, and the sound of his chest being like a drum remain in my mind all this while. Yeah, it's terrifying.
So, so it's both a beautiful place that you stay in Cameron Highland, at the same time surrounded with this whole sense of terror that at any time the Japanese could come in with just a whip and take anyone to.
No. I don't remember feeling any terror or any fear at all. It was just that the bad Japanese guy was somewhere in the background. And as long as we did not misbehave, we'll be okay. So, there wasn't a sense of terror or fear that pervaded us. No, not at all. It was a fun time, great time.
And what was when did you came back to Singapore?
45. So I left Singapore at age 2, came back at age 4. Age 3 or age 4, yeah. Yeah, and again, the memory of coming back was very, very vivid. Yeah, the family hired a truck. We drove all the way down from Cameron Highlands. I was seated with my grandmother on the rooftop of the driver's cab. Yeah, because the truck was driving very slowly. We were swaddled in blankets and stuff like that. It was very cold. And then entering Singapore, very dark. The scene in my mind is when we arrived at Serangoon Road, where we had a terrace house, row house. We were up. Our flat was upstairs, number 558A.
This is where Little India is right now?
No. Somewhere between New World and Lavender Street. That row of terrace houses. Yeah. Very dusty, very dim. There were hardly any street lights. And then going up the staircase into this dusty house that has been left empty all this while. Very strong memory, yeah.
Wow. What was the context that you came back? Under what circumstances?
No, the war was over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we came back and lived upstairs in this flat, not allowed to go downstairs. Mother did not allow us to go and mix with all the bad hats downstairs. Though we longed to go down and play, but we could not. So we sat at the windowsill, me and my brother, observing the comings and goings on in the street below.
And comparatively, it seems like you have enjoyed your time over in Cameron more because you were more free.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed my childhood in Singapore too. Yeah, and apart from the restriction from going downstairs, we had a lot of fun in the flat, right? Just climbing up and down the staircases. There was a flat roof behind the flat. Those flats, there was a kind of air well indentation, and there's a flat roof that covered the staircase that went down to the back door, which opened to the back lane, where the jamban collectors would come up every morning to take away the pail of shit in the bathroom. Yeah, and I remember, going to the toilet and looking down into this awful mess, right, with maggots and all. And that was just part of life. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual about it.
And you strike me as a person who is very eloquent and very good with words, English. Was that something that was, brought up to you by your parents, or was it in school?
Yeah, the home language was Hokkien and English, mostly English. Spoke Hokkien to my grandmother. Spoke Teochew to the housekeeper, the maid. English was very strongly taught in Anglo-Chinese school in Coleman Street by a Miss Russell. Yes. She was a battle axe, you might say. But we were drilled in grammar, in pronunciation, in proper sentence construction, and so on, So that gave us a very strong foundation in English language.
But at home, your parents will also, you communicate?
We spoke in English all the time.
Oh, okay. And your parents' education in English was because of?
My mother went to St. Margaret's and my father went to St. Joseph's. But they never finished school because my father's father, my grandfather, died and the family was in financial straits. They were very poor all the while. And my mother had to leave school because of the 1930 economic crash, which was a consequence of the 1929 financial crisis in the United States, which swept through the world. Her father's business completely collapsed. So everybody was in bad state, and they left school early.
But they recognize the importance of English, hence also use that for you, or?
Yeah. They recognize the importance of education, and in those days, my early childhood spent reading because there was nothing else to do. My father had ordered a whole set of children's encyclopedia. So, me and my brother read the whole lot, 26 volumes of it. And also Reader's Digest. We digested Reader's Digest, which came every month.
Yep.
And he also ordered National Geographic.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that really opened our minds to the whole world. So that was early education. And radio. Radio was very, very important. Because that brought out the imagination. You heard the words, but you saw the pictures in your mind. Journey to Space was a fantastic sequel. Yeah. Journey into Space, yeah.
Is there anything in terms of field of knowledge that stood out to you when you go through, this wide-ranging topics that you read?
Sorry, say that again.
Is there any field of knowledge? I mean, space or science, arts.
Science. I think science was very strong. And of course, in school we had to do Shakespeare. We had to do Charles Dickens, Tennyson's poetry. Yeah. So that was the dose of literature that I was exposed to. Yeah.
Why do you choose to be to study architect back in SP?
I never had to choose.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was the most natural thing for me to do because I was in my teenage years, early teens even. The family moved from the terrace house in Serangoon Road to a bungalow in Bradwell Heights. So that was a tremendous change of environment. Bradwell Heights in those days was surrounded by farms. and kind of disused or unused scrub land, which me and my neighborhood friends and my brother, that was a great place for roaming around. And I was building 3 houses. I was building an underground house. I built a house using scrap material which the contractors had left behind.
Oh, wow.
When we moved into the house, there were other houses around which were still under construction. So lots of material left around. So so it was a very natural thing to do, to build. And then, of course, also Meccano, right? Those metal toys, which we could construct bridges, we could construct buildings, we could construct anything we wanted, right? With
I never Meccano.
Meccano,
How do you say?
yeah. Meccano.
Is it anything like Lego?
No, not at all.
Better.
Much more basic.
Okay.
So there were punch metal pieces of different lengths. There were screws, there were angled junctions, there were wheels, there were gears and stuff like that, right? So we could build a motor car, for example.
Oh.
Yeah, out of these metal bits, we could build a bridge. So actually, my understanding of structure and construction came from there, and also in the buildings that I was building, right? I remember that me and another school friend who used to live in a very big house in Cane Hill, his father was an importer of motor cars.
Okay.
And so there were lots of wooden crates that were left around. So he and I used those crates and we built an incredibly complex house with all kinds of ramps and tunnels and level changes and lookout points and so on.
Wow.
Yeah, and we built that over a few months. So it was incredible. Yeah. So I never had to choose.
Yeah.
To me, architecture was the natural thing to do.
And this Meccano thing, is this a toy kind of thing?
It's a toy, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they discontinue it. Obviously now you
I
wouldn't
don't
be
know.
able to.
I think you may have a version of it now.
But it sounds amazing. This set of toys.
Yeah. And then of course I never understood the value of this kind of education till many years later. Well, maybe 5 years ago, I read Froebel, Freobel, the German educator, who invented the Froebel toys, which were educational. He felt that children would learn a lot by simply playing with toys.
And Froebel is the name of the book or the name of the author?
The name of the person.
Okay.
But
is there any piece of?
Yeah, you can actually buy Froebel toys today.
Okay.
You go to Toys R Us and you can get it.
And this is the book that you read, or a research paper, or?
No, that comes to another story, which I'm going to talk about this coming Saturday, right, on education, right? Because I did a whole review of all the educational philosophers.
Since we're on the note of education, let's dive into this a little bit. You were one of the first batch of students to study architecture back in Singapore Poly when it's still in Prince Edward Road, right? And graduated in 1964.
Yeah.
So how was architecture being taught then? And how is it different now? Because now you're an adjunct lecturer in NUS.
Well, the most the greatest influence on us was Lim Chong Kiat.
Okay.
And I think a very important architect. But he was also an educator. He's 10 years older than me. We are still very much in touch. And all my classmates in architectural school still consider him as the great teacher. Yeah. So he was an important influence. But I think more than that is really an illustration of Lao Tzu's philosophy, that if you do more, you achieve less. So our school was a mess. We had 4 heads of department, changed one after another. The curriculum was a complete mess.
I mean, you were the first batch.
Yeah, of course. So we were left very much to our own devices. We fooled around a lot. We had a lot of free time. A lot of time was spent in the Sarabat stall across the Prince Edward Road under the trees, where we would spend lots of time debating and arguing philosophical issues. Yeah. So I was kind of a evangelical Christian in those days.
So was that the issues that you were arguing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And then we all read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Yes.
Great book.
Yes. And many of us were besotted with those ideas because it fitted with our kind of individualism that was emerging in our younger days, and also the kind of anti-establishment sentiment that we all had. But we were also, particularly me, was also somewhat of a Marxist.
How do you find Marxist?
Okay. In the last couple of years in Anglo-Chinese School, Barker Road, we had a small group of friends who were reading and discussing the Communist Manifesto. Yes. And the leader of this group is a guy called Teo Jin Hong. He's dead now. Decided to form our group and call our group the Socialist Club.
Okay.
And the principal, Mr. Teo Chandi, heard about it and called us up, said, "You better disband your group. Otherwise I'll sack the whole lot of you." So we then decided to disband, and then we started a church.
You started a church?
Yeah, so which is now called the Barker Road Methodist Church. Yeah, to which many of the senior bureaucrats in Singapore, like Lim Cheong Guan, Ngiam Tong Dao, all these guys were all members of this church, right? So in a strange sort of way, the social concerns which we young kids, 15-year-olds, created, has lived on. And of course, during that period, the group was split between those who had a heightened social conscience, like the ex-Marxists, and a new group that emerged, which were evangelical Christian, which manifested into 2 basic movements: the Student Christian Movement and the Varsity Christian Fellowship.
Wait, so Marxist, does it mean like
Socialist?
Socialist. Okay, that's another word for socialist.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we were not advocating armed struggle or anything like that at all, right? Nor were we advocating class struggle, right? Yeah. We were just concerned that human social justice and so on should prevail, right? And we had teachers who were inclined that way. I also, right? I mean, Teo Chan Bee himself, right, was a member of the Progressive Party, right? And Lim Chun Mong, also another science teacher, was a member of the, I can't remember, Labour Party. Could be, I can't remember the exact thing. But those were the early days of political ferments in Singapore before the PAP came into picture.
So, what did you learn out of your time in Singapore Poly? Because it seems that under the curriculum part, there wasn't much structure. It was a lot of mucking about. And so a lot of learning is actually outside under the tree.
Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, actually. There were other things. For example, in the first year, we had to make our own drawing board. Because in those days, there's no computers, right? So all drawings were done by freehand drafting. So we had to make our own drawing board and make our own T-square. You know what these things are?
Some kind of instrument that help you draw.
Yeah, the T-square is what you slide up and down along a straight edge, and then you could draw absolutely precise horizontal lines. And then you had a set square with which you could draw vertical lines, right? So learning by doing was a very big part of our early education. We had to build a brick structure for an incinerator, so we had to lay bricks. And we didn't realize how difficult it is, because a brick is a three-dimensional object. No?
Yeah.
Then how do you get it to be level, to be in line, to have enough bedding in the mortar, not too much, not too little, and to align with the next block. So these are all very difficult manipulations that we had to learn. And so what we learned from that is a respect for
The craft.
for crafting, for geometry, for precision, for accuracy, and so on. Then in the workshop, I learned metal welding. I did wood turning, right? So we were introduced to 4-cutter machines. How do you make a door jamb running through the 4-cutter machine? So all that was very powerful. Then we had very good design exercises. Many of the exercises were short exercises. Sometimes 1 day, sometimes 2 days, sometimes 1 week, sometimes 1 month. So we learned how to think fast, how to work fast, right?
What were some of these exercise scenarios?
One of our early projects was to design and make a model of a fisherman's shelter, right? So you use raw materials. So you went to I was living in a bungalow, right? So we could cut leaves and twigs and everything and use that to build a model of a fisherman's hut. Yeah, that was one. Then another early design was design a tourist visitor center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we did that. And then also the design a kampong house. The kampong house was really for me a major conceptual moment. My kampong house had a flat roof.
Flat roof.
Flat
Okay.
roof.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I wanted a modern kampong house. You see? And it had movable walls which you could open to the landscape, to the airflow. It was raised on stilts. That was formative, and in many ways generative, because how many years later? 40 years later, I designed a tropical city, which was a project which was commissioned by Mr. Dhanabalan, who was then the Minister of National Development, who wanted new ideas coming from the private sector and not be completely tied down to ideas that were in-house, HDB, URA. So I generated this concept. Which is a quest that has remained with us since the first year in architectural school. Yes, and that is, what is modern tropical architecture, right? And Lim Chong Keat has left that message with us all these years, 50 over years now, that Western architecture has never dealt with this question. Yes, the British were building buildings in Nigeria and Ghana and Africa and so on. But these were not urban buildings. These were suburban. right? So all those ideas about, sun angles and wind flow and so on.
And how would you say that architecture is being taught now in school?
Oh, that's a very tough question. I mean, I've just written I've been writing on this topic for maybe 20, 30 years. And the latest essay which I wrote as a draft, which I sent to the coordinator for the first year program, which he has agreed to host a discussion with all the tutors and the students on it. It's very, very fundamental. A lot of things have happened. Meanwhile, the kind of life that we lived as young students and young architects is quite different from what they experience now.
Before, when you were then in SP.
So the starting point in my thinking about architecture education today is you have to start with what is the nature of the world today, and also what is the nature of our students today.
Could you just sort of give me a rough understanding of how it's being taught now? I mean, also for the read.
The students are well. Let me just talk about design, because there are other things, right?
Go for it.
In design, there's a kind of implicit indoctrination going on, although this would never be admitted to.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. For example, from first year, they make models. And the models are always for convenience, and they never really think about it. It's made up of cardboard and foam panels. So the implicit assumption there is that buildings are made out of flat planes, like this, wall planes. When I know that tropical architecture is not generated by the wall. Tropical architecture is generated by the roof. There actually should be no walls. All walls should not be celebrated as planar enclosures. They are operable. They should be operable. They should be as permeable as possible, right? For all kinds of weather.
So like weather could come in and out.
So the implicit assumption is walls, right? Which is the kind of language of modern architecture derived from Western experience, where you needed to have absolute enclosure because of the differences between summer and winter, right? So, but that's not even made conscious. It is implicit. It is indoctrination without intention.
So this is some of the conventional wisdoms that has
indoctrination without intention. That's exactly the problem. And it's very difficult to get it across to the tutors because they themselves are indoctrinated. And they are not aware of it.
Yeah.
You see? So this is the problem. So it's going to be a long way to work it out. And our students today are very anxious about their future, right?
Like everyone else?
Yes, more so than our time, because I think in our time we coming from the middle class. I mean, we could see we were not overly concerned about our future. Okay. Today they are, because the competition for jobs and very great.
By our future, you mean job security, how much you can pay, and how much money do I need to earn?
In those days, we didn't even think about such things. Yeah, I mean, it was so what? We just get on with life. Today they have to think about such things.
Yes.
And I think the fear factor is weighing heavily on them. So I teach all these years. I can see the decline.
Decline what?
Decline in ambition. Ambition in the largest sense of it, that ambition to find new things, to ambition to realize potentialities untapped in in the social and cultural and environmental realities, right?
Because they're caught up
They are
this
very
future.
conventional. They are very conventional because it is rational to be conventional. To be conventional is to succeed in life. That's the culture we have created.
Yeah. Actually, I would like to dive into a little bit more about some of the what you like to call it, indoctrination without intention. Yeah. Are there any other things you like to bring up in that sense, in the circle of either architecture or life in general, or education? Yeah.
Well, there's a whole ecosystem that has been. That's the only way to describe the way the forces of society, economics, politics weighs upon the individuals and the communities, right? So it's a whole construction of moving parts that drive people in certain directions. What are these moving parts? Money, acceptability, success, social acceptability, right, and so on, right? So people are very worried.
Are there any? Go for it.
They are worried without being conscious of being worried. That's how deep the indoctrination has become. It's become the very air that you breathe.
How are there any exercises or questions one should consider to know if they are in that cycle?
When you face a big crisis. So usually, well, the crisis could be external or internal. External crises are usually induced by massive social unrest or economic unrest. But fortunately, we have a very able government who has cushioned us from these extreme experiences. So therefore, the pressures are internal. Okay, what are these? Let me describe it. I mean, usually people understand this as midlife crisis and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And I think those are quite real. But let me explain. I try to understand the internal dynamics of this kind of crisis. What drives it, right? So I've written about this. Let me explain it this way. When we are born, we are in a state of undifferentiated consciousness. So we feel the warmth, we feel the light. The Greek word for this is noia. Noia. A state of undifferentiated consciousness, or a state of bliss. Okay? That state of bliss is interrupted when the undifferentiated consciousness begins to be differentiated. So the first differentiation is the differentiation between self and mother. Okay? Or self and the crib, self and the pillow, self and the blanket, self and the bed, self and the room. So those are the differentiations that immediately follow very rapidly from the first differentiation. Thereafter, the differentiation explodes into a differentiation of the world as objects, world as sensations, world as threats and joys. That's knowledge. So, in the undifferentiated state, the self is in the center of the being. Okay? in the differentiated state, the self moves to the edge of being, which by definition is therefore paranoia.
Okay, and so by knowing this,
Okay, hang on. Paranoia is, of course, the kind of paranoia I'm talking about does not amount to clinical paranoia. It is simply the condition of existential anxiety. Since you do not know what you do not know, and you want to know what you do not know, you are in a state of anxious search.
that's midlife crisis.
Oh, that's the extreme case.
Right.
Now, as this as this differentiation goes on, which is knowledge, school, learning, blah blah blah, the self in its state of existential anxiety builds up around itself a constructed self as a defense against the anxiety, against threats that may emerge from the external world, right? So therefore, the constructed self is the artificial self. It is the presentation of self to oneself as well as to others. So you fake it all the way. This is the human condition. It is the condition of immaturity.
Okay.
So the first crisis occurs when the individual becomes aware of this false construction, and is therefore asking of himself or herself, what is the authentic self? The authentic self having been artificialized all this while. Now, some young people achieve maturity, that is the state of self-awareness earlier. Some never achieve it at all.
Okay, so I really want, that's one thing I want to dive deeper into, which is, now that maybe they are aware that they are immature, what are some things that they can do right now that to achieve maturity, like in your context? And also, before we dive into that question, for those of people who want to learn a little bit more into what you talk about, what books should they be reading? Or it seems like a collective knowledge that you have gathered and stringing it into words. But if there's any philosophy that one should dive deeper into to know what you're talking about. And I'm asking this question also for me.
There's a lot, but you have to find the pieces together. You have to stitch the pieces together. Wow. Because each person's existential anxiety is constructed differently.
No, but I mean just on the topic of what you say, like existential crisis and the idea of self and constructed self. What are some books of philosophy that one can dive deeper into?
Okay, before we go there, let's talk about how this constructed self is maintained.
Oh, wait. I actually want to move on because we have a lot to get through. Yeah. So I'm going to leave the reading to later on if anybody want to dive into, because...
No, I'm not going to talk about reading yet. I'm talking about how does this constructed self persist? Okay? Internally, it persists because you want it to persist, because you are afraid of the truth about yourself.
Okay.
But externally, the conditions are unfavorable. Why? Because they have been made that way. Why is it made that way? Okay. The condition of I would call protracted adolescence is manufactured by the marketing industry. Because the construction of self relies on the acquisition of status symbols.
Or material goods.
Material goods, status symbols. Mm-hmm. And this serves very well corporate enterprise, corporate business, right? So you need a Lanvin shirt because if you don't have one, you are not with it.
Okay.
You see,
I don't know Lamban,
right?
but sure,
Or whatever, right?
something that's
Or
expensive.
if you
sure.
don't, if you don't have
Lamborghini.
yeah, then you really are a failure.
Okay.
So these are the accoutrements by which the economy ensures that you remain immature.
No, but I understand this, and that's what has came up with a lot of in a lot of talks with a lot of my interviewees before. But one piece of the puzzle I haven't figured out is, what can people do to sort of desensitize or distance themselves from that? Or I mean, maybe the first step of that is being self-aware. Yeah. So, are there any things questions they should ask themselves or activities they should do? For me, I highly recommend just traveling, long-term travel, being one of the activities to do.
No, consumption is the opiate. It's the opium that keeps you dumb.
So should we just not consume?
So traveling is just another form of consumption.
Okay.
Right. However, being in a different situation may offer you the chance to self-reflect.
So self-reflection is more the key.
Self-reflection is the key, yes.
Got it.
But self-reflection is very easily diverted or distracted.
So reflection with guided reflection. Yeah. Okay.
So chance encounters with enlightened people, chance encounters with surprising experiences,
yeah,
do help.
Well, hence they are listening to this podcast. Then maybe they can get some of your enlightenment.
Yeah, but I'm not so hopeful because because the human mind, the human being is so incredibly capable of justification.
No, you're right. You're right.
So intelligence is used very effectively to delude oneself.
Fair enough. And coming back a little bit to, I think modern day sort of education, I think we have pointed out a lot about what's lacking. But what do you think has improved?
This is a very strange thing,
Why is it strange?
What has improved is the easy availability of tremendous amounts of knowledge and information. But equally, because it's so easy to get at, you can always defer it, you see.
Right.
I'll look into it another time. I'll look into it another time.
Okay, sure. And after graduating from SP in 1964, you went to work a little while. Where was this? Is it the Malayan
Architects Co-Partnership,
right? Yeah. And then I think there's somewhere I was reading through, you say that this was not enough for you, and you then left on to do your own self-exploration. So why do you come to that sort of conclusion that the experience or the education isn't enough?
No, I wanted to see the world.
Oh, okay.
Right, so I went on around the world jaunt.
And would you say that this is because of the inner wanderlust?
Just curiosity, that's all.
Okay. No, because I did the same. I went, a gap year before, after the army.
Yeah. I think quite important.
Mm.
Yeah. I think all our students should have a gap year.
Agree. And so this is a little bit of a side turn. I'll ask you that, what do you think does architecture mean to your student when they come to NUS? The word architecture.
Means funny design. Yeah. The funnier, the better. That's part of the indoctrination, you see.
Why would they think that? What's their
because they've been looking at pictures and images, right? And I may give you an example.
Okay.
This what is this?
What?
The interlace. It's a big influence on our
the interlace.
The interlace.
Is that a building or?
Yeah, that block of flats in.
Oh, the Pinnacle.
Yeah, no, not Pinnacle. Interlace in
Interlace.
Alexandra Road.
Okay, I don't know how to look
Yeah.
it up. I'll link it up.
No, all these Lego blocks that are stacked.
Yeah, I saw that. They won some award.
Oh, they love it. They love it because that is what architecture should be all about.
Why do they think that?
Because it's Lego, right?
Maybe they should be playing the toys that you were playing instead of Lego.
That's the problem. That's the problem, right? Exactly. So I did an experiment with my fourth-year students. I asked them to analyze the structure. How does it actually stack on top of each other? What happens to the columns? Do some columns go through some bedrooms? Because when you stack, right, the column has to go through, right? They never thought of it.
And columns, by actually columns, you mean the big
pillars,
pillar,
the pillars, yeah. The pillars.
No, I'm trying to make this easy to understand because
the pillars, right? Here, All right. So the beams are the horizontal structure. Columns are the vertical ones. Okay. Yeah. Okay. They never thought about it because the image is so captivating. It's so important. They never look further. See. So this tells me something. It tells us something. That image becomes everything. The culture of image is what's gripping the world today. Right down to the village.
Okay. And I think actually, you know what? I think Jack Sim used that very well as one of his persuasion or
He wants to have the image of a wonderful toilet. But there's a very powerful lecture by Chris Hedges.
And how do I spell Hedges?
Hedges.
Okay.
Chris Hedges. He's an American intellectual. He spent 20 years as a war correspondent.
Okay.
So he's seen the worst of human situations. And his early education he was training to be a priest in a seminary, right? So he's a very conscious person. The lecture is on YouTube.
Okay. I'll link it up.
One of the things people must see.
Okay.
Must see. It's called The Empire of Illusion, which describes the world we live in and how we are indoctrinated.
Great. How about conversely, what do you think does architecture mean to you at your current season of life?
Architecture as individual buildings is, to me, rather stupid. Okay? So that's a kind of a disavowal of my professional orientation. Okay? To me,
disavow.
I reject it.
Okay. Your English is too good. I need to clarify sometimes. Pardon me.
The important thing today is not the individual building. The important thing today is the way buildings form together into a living organism. That means the neighborhood, the design of the neighborhood, and the design of the city. Okay? This is where we need a major overhaul of thinking. Buildings are designed or thought of, cities are thought of as mechanisms, well-functioning mechanisms, right? When in fact they should be thought of as living organisms. The difference between a mechanism and an organism is that an organism is capable of processing information. A mechanism cannot. Right? A mechanism only carries out the instructions that are assigned to it. Okay? Organism is able to process huge amounts of experiential data, information, and transmit and produce new information.
So, let me get this right. So you would say that architecture meant to you as a design of a city, more than a design of a singular building, but also how that works together as an organism rather than a mechanism.
Well, let's be clear about this. Okay. Let's take a typical HDB estate. An HDB estate is a well-functioning mechanism.
Okay.
In which the designers and the policies, administrative policies embedded in the design and management of the neighborhood of the HDB estate ensures that there will be no conflicts. That schools are kept away in quiet areas so that students don't get disturbed by the hum and hustle and bustle of the city, of the place, and therefore can concentrate on their studies. Okay, and that housing neighborhoods are compact so that they can access to the various facilities well and so on. In other words, livability is very high.
Yeah.
But intelligence is very low. That's the problem.
Okay.
How do you increase the intelligence? You must build in the nervous system.
Okay.
I'm going to give another side turn again. As an architect, it's a really tough trade, it's a tough profession because it requires firstly the one to put in long hours at work and also dedicating a big part of their life to, getting that accreditation. So what are some questions one should ask themselves to determine if they are a right fit to be an architect?
It's so different for everybody's different, right?
Sure. But maybe some questions to pose to them.
To be let me address the young people because they are the ones that are
So 20s.
much more concerned about this, right? The profession has in many ways ossified, in the sense that it has congealed into several very powerful practices. These are big practices.
Yeah. So you mean the four different, the big four?
Or the big four, or whatever.
Okay.
And then there are hundreds of little ones.
Okay. Independent architecture firms.
Yes.
I'm translating it to English
That's
as we
right.
speak.
Yeah. So, young person aspiring to be an architect must ask themselves, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Do you want to go and join a big firm, big four, in which case you will just be a cog in the wheel, right? You will have, if you are hardworking and skillful, you will have a good life. But forget about trying to change the world.
Okay.
If you are if you join a small little practice that is building houses and small buildings, also forget about changing the world.
Also, you can forget about
In other words,
the world totally.
forget about changing the world. You're just a cog in the wheel, either a cog in a big wheel or a cog in a small wheel.
Okay.
That's
So
your choice.
firstly, forget about changing the world.
Yeah. But if you are really serious about changing the world,
Oh, there we go.
which means that you recognize in yourself creative impulses and social impulses, cultural impulses, which you must fulfill, then you have to become a very knowledgeable person and a very strategic person. What do you mean by strategic? That means you got to see the big picture all the time as you focus on the small picture. So the relationship between the small picture and the big picture, you must be very capable.
So the macro and the micro.
You must be able to rapidly scan through the different scales of involvement or problematics that you will face. That means you have to be really educated.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the question. So, so the question is, what are questions that they should ask themselves, before committing this a long amount of time to get accredited? So, firstly, you need to know that you won't be able to change the world, or maybe you do. Then you got to really put in a lot.
First, you have to decide whether you want to or not.
Or you want to change the world or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. If you say no, I don't want to change the world, then okay, no problem. Carry on. Carry on, Sergeant.
Okay.
Yeah. But
if you want to change the world,
then you have to become very highly educated.
Okay. So, don't want to change the world, you mean by you are fine with being a small cog in a big wheel, or being a small cog in a small firm lah. Small wheel. So those are people who don't want to change the world. So let's talk about people who want to change the world, right? You talk about macro being strategic, and micro, the things to do and having detailed steps. So let's say an individual, like you have a niece that come to you and say, "Hey, I really want to change the world. I
have never come across such a person, no."
Oh, well, let's just say there is, and then I say, Uncle King Soon, I have 10 years. I want to dedicate 10 years of my life. I want to make this 10 years, or let's just say, I don't know, do you think 10 years is a good amount, or 7 years, or 5 years? I don't know. Okay, let's give an arbitrary number of 7 years. I want to change the world. In this 7 years, what are some strategic moves that I should take on, and skills that I should learn, or experience that I should have, in order to be a person, maybe an architect, that have the possibility of changing the world?
Well, listen to Gandhi, right? You want to change the world, change yourself first. So that is that's why I say get educated. You cannot change anything if you are not smart enough.
Okay. And is there any specific thing, like, obviously you say this school is not very good. Is there any specific things that they can do? Like, this is the school, go there, and this is the person, and this is what you should learn.
There's no school that's good enough.
Okay.
Right? It's the only school that's good enough is the school of life. Right? The formal education that you get is only a small part of that. Right? Strategically, yes, you need the piece of paper. So get it.
In between doing that, is there any other thing that they...
But while you're getting it, get smart.
How does one get smart?
Know yourself.
How does one know themselves?
Introspection. Right? Test yourself. Put yourself at risk. And then see how you react. Right? Make friends with people you don't like. Right? Help the poor. Because in doing so, you will learn aspects of reality which you do not know in your own personal comfort zone. Right? In other words, if you don't take risks, you will never learn about yourself.
And this is very general, right? I mean, I kind of want to give people some actionable things that they can, do. I mean, of course, getting an education is just needed. You just need that as a baseline to jump off from. Well, sure, helping the poor. Are there anything else that come to mind in this strategic 7-8 years that they have?
Okay. There are the 7 seas which you have to sail the 7 seas.
Okay. But actually what I'm more interested in is, how do you acquire the 7 Cs, which is...
Okay, step by step, right? The first C is confidence. And where does confidence come from? Confidence comes from skill. Just think about it. It's physical. Okay? When a child is born, it lies in a crib, right? What is the next thing the child does? Try to turn over, right? It's bodily. It's controlling the body, right? Organizing the muscles and the geometry of turning around. And then the next thing is he wants to crawl. Why does he want to crawl? Because it is an impulse. Respect that impulse. Then he wants to stand, and he wants to walk, and then he wants to run, and then he wants to jump. Okay, so physical development, the skilling of the body is the foundation for confidence. Testing the body, through physical
Tests.
hardships, challenges, is a very important part of confidence building. Then other kinds of confidence of thinking, confidence of feeling, confidence of relating. All of these confidences build up the overall confidence of the person. Then you get courage. Right? And with courage, then you dare to ask difficult questions.
Which is curiosity.
Curiosity. And then with curiosity, you can then become creative. There's no creativity without curiosity. And
You want to
then,
dive in a little bit more about that, the relationship between curiosity and creativity.
yeah, because you ask difficult questions, therefore you are impelled to find answers. Okay? And as you find more and more answers, you begin to join the dots. Right? And the process of joining the dots is the creative process. Right? So you realize things that are not commonly realized. And in that way, you become empowered. And because you are empowered and confident, then you can have compassion. Because if you do not develop compassion, then if you stop there at creativity, you can be a very good crook.
I think what's really missing when I first read about the 7Cs is that I never knew it's linear.
It's linear.
And now that you say it, because whenever I run into problem whenever you try to give someone a whole lot of information, try to get them digested, and then they just stuck with too much information to digest. But now that you say that it's linear, it's easier to follow.
Yeah. And then with compassion, then you can be very collaborative. And this is where Jack has added commitment. Yes. Yeah. Then you are really on the way to changing the world.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back a little bit. Back when you did SPUR, which is Singapore Planning and Urban Research Group. Yeah. That's in the 1960s. Yeah. Why was that? Why did you start SPUR? And I guess the follow-up question would be, what are some ideas that you have during that time?
Go ahead. Lots of ideas, but just to illustrate the impact of those activities in SPUR, we moved the airport from Paya Lebar to Changi.
Maybe you can explain a bit also about
Okay. SPUR was a group of idealistic architects who wanted to change the world, starting with changing Singapore. And then it then attracted to its core group, which were architects, academics from political science, from sociology, from geography.
Oh, okay. So it's not only just
not just architect, yeah. And so became a very collaborative group.
Right. Kind of like a think tank.
And we kind of learn from each other.
Yeah.
and our conceptual ability became much more comprehensive, much more knowledgeable. Yeah. And of course, we run into the government, right?
And I guess now I know what that is for. Why did you guys started it, and how has that helped Singapore? I mean, I'd like to go a little bit into the details of it. So, how do you guys run this meeting? Is it people just like bring up problems, or is there a group chart of problems, and then you discuss it one by one, or you rank it first? What is it like?
Well,
because there's never ending problems, always problems.
The first year was devoted to self-education. So we divided the group up into different topics, right? Housing. I was looking at industrial development, recreation, traffic planning, transportation, nature, urban conservation, and so on. So these were all the different topic areas. One important topic area was the decision-making process in itself in planning, the structure of planning. So after that 1 year, we all felt much more confident in thinking through some big issues of our Singapore environment. For example, I was very critical of the lack of housing provision within the Jurong Industrial Estate. So I was arguing for a lot more public housing to be built in Jurong. There were plans, but I think our public pronouncements on it could have contributed to the acceleration of those plans. On transport planning, we were rather critical of the government coming down hard on pirate taxis.
Pirate taxis.
Yeah. These were owners of vehicles who were plying along the main roads, picking up passengers along the way. They were doing a good job. But the government cracked down on it. And so we argued against the crackdown. We're saying that yes, there are issues involved like insurance, like maintenance of the vehicles and so on. So our argument was regularize it. Okay? So ironically, 50 years later, we have Grab and we have Uber.
Which they're still trying to wrap their head around, trying to form policies around it, right? Actually, so you bring out the topic that I'm very, very interested about, which is the decision-making process or framework around this planning. What can you just share a little bit about that body of knowledge that you guys have researched and acquired then?
Yeah. The problem then was, and I think to some extent it still is the case, HDB was the principal driver of physical development because housing was a social and political priority. Town planning was a department which was rather ill-equipped and also not very high up in the administrative hierarchy. And then URA at that time was URD, which is Urban Renewal Department, was a department within HDB, right? So the coordination between these three agencies was very poor. And then on top of that, JTC, PUB, PWD, they all had their own architecture and planning departments. Oh. Yes, and they were doing their own thing.
Okay. They're more nimble.
Maybe. But coordinated planning was weak. It is very ironical that I'm now coming back to that question, But at that time we were saying that the planning department planning department should become a planning authority.
So it's
And
like
therefore it should be the coordinating institution
the
for
umbrella.
all the other things, right?
Okay.
That was my view in those days. And I think that view eventually became the URA. Okay. And so the mechanization of the environment was put into high gear. Yeah, and so we have the Singapore which we know today. I'm now reviewing that. I'm arguing a different case. I'm saying that the decision-making process, not only on physical planning, has been so centralized, yet departmentalized, right?
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so you have different departments like EDB, JTC, URA, HDB, all these departments like PUB and so on, right? But they all come under ministers who are represented on the cabinet. So that's a pyramidal structure, right? And there are institutional and departmental imperatives that operate. I suspect.
Meaning each of them have their wants and needs.
Yes. There is a consensus culture that has emerged out of this. Okay. Now this is where I interviewed a very senior retired civil servant who told me it's a very interesting thing. That Dr. Goh was the principal, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, the minister for the economy, Minister of Finance, was a very powerful mover. Okay. And he used to ask various bureaucrats to write position papers on all manner of things. He was a very curious guy.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's the one I have the greatest respect for. Yeah. And his instruction is this: not more than 3 pages. If it's more than 3 pages, I throw away.
Why is that so?
If you cannot condense your thoughts into 3 pages, that means you are not clear what you're thinking about. I have no time for you.
Wow.
So they all wrote 3 pages.
Wow.
And then when he looked at it and says, yes, I know this is your department's point of view. What is your point of view? If you don't have a point of view or a minority point of view, I'm not interested to talk to you.
Oh, actually, would you like to elaborate on that? You mean the department point of view versus the self point of view?
Yeah. So let's say you are in the traffic planning department.
Okay.
So traffic planning department obviously have done research and statistics and everything, and this is the position this department takes on this issue, right? Dr. Goh will say, then what's your view? If you don't have a view of your own, I'm not interested to talk to you.
Okay. Why is that so?
So thereafter, right, these 3 pages always contain a section of minority views.
So it's like a subsection.
Yeah, minority views. Okay. Dr. Goh would tell these bureaucrats, I want you to go to the ground and talk to people on the ground and get everything that they know so that you know what they know. And then tell me.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you're not doing a job.
And is this different from the self, that means the writer point of view, versus the ground point of view? Is that 2 sections, or is it all combined into this minority section?
The minority section would include all these other views, which
there's a lot of subsection.
Yeah. Okay. So that this is part of the culture in those days, where there was debate, there was a contestation of ideas, and thinking out of the box and so on. Today it's all consensus, right? So this is the problem. So I think because of this, Singapore is in the doldrums. Intellectually and conceptually, we are in the doldrums.
I really like that Dr. Goh 3-page framework in getting information.
Lee Kuan Yew was even worse.
Oh,
One
yes.
page.
1 page.
You don't give me
So
one page,
basically,
I throw
Doctor
away.
will cut it down to 1 page. Give to Lee Kuan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I always wonder, how did they consume so much information?
Yeah.
Well, it's because when they get it, it's already
Yeah.
condensed.
And then, as Ngiam Tong Dao says, right, in those days, cabinet meetings were rambunctious. They were arguing. So there was this contest of ideas, you know.
Yeah.
Today, according to Ngiam, who got scolding for it, because PM Lee says, how do you know that there is no discussion, there's no rambunctious discussion? How do you know? You don't know.
You're not there.
You're not there. But I think looking from the outside, I think we can sense that there is a kind of a differential culture of agreement, you know. So there's a lot of echoing. It's an echo chamber. So my proposal now is that we should divide the whole island into 5 parts with 5 governments.
You mean geographically?
Yes. Which is already there, but we should turn it. We should develop from there. We have the 5 CDCs, right? Northeast, Southeast, South
Central Development.
Community Development Councils,
okay.
right, with their own mayors, right? We have the 5, right, and the Central CDC. Turn them into administrative districts. So in each of them, you have a URA, HDB, a whole lot of them.
Oh. Wow.
Let them compete. So you have 5 ministries of education, right? So each of the 5 would be driven by the ground conditions and also conceptual conditions, right? Through which they would then propose and administer appropriate policies and methodologies. And may the best one win.
The best one win.
Yeah. So if you're a parent and you realize that, hey, Southeast CDC schools are much better, I send my children there.
Right, then everyone moves to South.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think
That's an idea.
that's an idea for and that means the tremendous build up of local capability.
Yeah.
Right? Which I think has to be a mix between private sector and public sector. Right? So the let's say the Northeast CDC's HDB, right, would be a conglomeration of the talents, the design talent, the planning talent of that area. So young graduates from our schools and so on would have a choice of where to work and make contributions to the real welfare of Singapore, instead of just becoming a cog in the wheel.
What are some beliefs that you hold dear before that don't matter to you that much now?
I don't know, man.
That's fine. It's throwing out there. I think even if I were to actually answer this question, it would be quite hard. To reflect on. But it's just something that I personally would love to do, just to map out my personal belief, and I don't know what kind of system to do that, but it would be an interesting thing, and to review it every year and swap in and out ideas, and do this brain mapping, sort of like a mental capture of how your brain works, and then every year and see how the change. It's like a big project though.
I don't know what does that entail? I don't know.
I think what it entails for me is that, firstly, it actually irons out a lot of cognitive bias or how to say, things that are facing each other that we haven't get to ask when we do this exercise. And then when a new idea comes into the picture or a new concept, that needs to fit in beautifully with this ecosystem of belief or ideas that I have. But let me just,
You're talking about yourself?
I'm talking about myself, sorry.
Yeah.
But this is not about me. This interview is about you. So.
Oh, okay.
And we're only just at, and we barely finished first page. Oh my god. Okay, we might need to come back to do a round two. Let's go back a little bit on traveling. So now we're still in the 1960s. Oh my god. Which is almost 60 years ago. How was that experience? Did you fly? Back then there wasn't Singapore Airline, and how was it?
No, I bought a KLM ticket around the world. And in those days, as long as you move in one direction, you can change your flights back and forth. So you can zigzag like that around the world. Right, for the same price. Yeah.
What was the price of if you remember?
$10,000.
And $10,000 is back then was equivalent to...
So I had to borrow the money to travel. Yeah.
To like, I don't know, 50,000, would you say? Like now?
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Hence you...
Yeah.
Even borrow money, is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And after buying the ticket, how much do you give yourself to
$5 a day.
$5 a day? Was it enough?
Arthur Fromer's famous books on traveling for $5 a day.
Oh, what book is that?
There's a whole series, right?
What's it called?
Europe on $5 a day, New York on $5 a day. It's a whole series. Arthur Fromer.
Arthur Fromer. So
F-R-O-M-M-E-R, I think.
Okay. No, because now the series of book is called Lonely Planet. There isn't such thing called... maybe there is, but not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, so you read that book, the series of book, and then you're like, okay, I can do it for $5 a day.
Yeah. Really,
and there you go. You prepare $5 a day. You borrow some money to buy the ticket, and you went.
Yeah, right.
What were some of the countries? What were the first few countries that you went to, and how was the experience then? And before that, the only other place that you traveled was Malaysia, because that's Cameron.
No, I went to... But in my second year, I organized a trip to Java, where I think there were 6 of us. We hired a bus in Jakarta, and then we drove all the way to the southern coast of Java, and then ended up in Gilimanuk. Crossed over to Banyuwangi, into Bali, had a wonderful time, came back on the north coast, and then flew back to Singapore. Yeah. So that was an incredible trip. And that because I read a few books on Indonesian history and culture, and I was enthralled by it. Yeah. And so we went to see Borobudur, Prambanan, right? Visited the ITB, Institute of Technology Bandung, met with the Professor Van Romont. We were treated like visiting dignitaries, which we didn't realize why.
So you were treated very nicely...
By the government.
By the government?
Yes. We didn't realize this is 1961 or 62.
So why?
The trip by boat to Jakarta was paid for and sponsored by the Indonesian embassy in Singapore.
So you did write to the embassy because you need a visa to get there, right?
Yeah. And when we arrived, we were received by the governor of Jakarta and ministers and so on. We were very flabbergasted. We didn't realize it, but it was much later that we realized that it was part of the Indonesia Raya concept. They were indoctrinating us to be favorable towards the dominance of Indonesia, which later led to confrontasi, 1965.
Okay, wait. So let me get this right a little bit. So they paid for your trip.
Yeah,
because they try to
part of the trip. The rest of we pay
okay,
ourselves. Yeah.
okay, part of the trip because they try to impose
They
some ideas.
I think they saw us as the avant-garde of the new generation
Oh, wow.
of intellectuals who were favorable towards the dominance of Indonesia.
Right, obviously because you want to take
So
a
they
trip
want
there.
to cultivate us, lah.
Oh, right, right.
So we
Wow.
become
they are way far-sighted.
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what were the first few countries that fascinated you that, make you want to go there? Because so Indonesian, you went to Malaysia before and then Singapore, and now you bought this $10,000 KLM ticket around the world. Which were the first countries you went to?
I went to India. Well, first of all, both my senior partners, William Lim and Lim Chong Kiat, who were the partners of Malayan Architects Core Partnership, they actually loaned me the money.
Oh, okay.
They did another thing which was fantastic. They introduced me to all their friends on this whole trip. So I actually went and met them, and I learned a lot from them. Okay, so when I went to India, I met the main architects who were responsible for modern architecture in India in the 60s, right?
Wow.
So that was really a powerful learning thing. I also began to understand the kind of the dichotomy between modernism and a concern for the tradition, for the Indian traditions. So they were trying to marry the two, not quite successfully, but not to be faulted for the attempt.
And they know William and your other friend know this because in school.
Because they studied with them when they were in England.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So they were all their good friends, and they became my good friends. Yeah.
Right.
So after that, I went to Istanbul, and then to Israel, and then cross over the demilitarized zone, carrying my luggage.
Oh, back then it wasn't a backpack, right? It was like the hard luggage. Were you dressed up nice in suits and?
Just very scruffy.
Very scruffy.
So walked across to Jordan.
Yeah.
And to do so, I had to get a visa.
Okay.
To get a visa, you have to declare that you are, what is it? You're not a Jew.
Okay.
So I had to go to a priest, Christian priest, who's certified that I'm not a Jew, I'm a Christian. Otherwise, you're not allowed into Jordan.
Right. It's a tough process.
Yeah, so went into Jordan. So I could see the difference between the two economies, the two cultures, right? On one side, Israel is green. Farms are all green, irrigation. On the other side, it's all brown. Very clear.
How long did you stay in each of these countries? Were your only purpose just to meet some of these architects, and then once you learn whatever you need to learn, you move on?
Then I also lived in a kibbutz in Israel, where I learned to experience the early socialism of Israel.
Could you paint us a picture of this kibbutz?
Okay. First, you've got to understand what is a kibbutz. A kibbutz is a kind of idealistic human. It was an experiment in a human community development. Okay, and all based around farming. So the book, what's the name of the writer? The title of the book is called Children of the Dream by Bruno Bettelheim. Very important book, which from which I learned a lot about the role of philosophy and human settlements, which I carry till today, right? In my ideas about the human settlement as an organism and not as a mechanism. Okay, all that, and how the children of the dream lost the dream because the kibbutz and all these idealistic kind of humanist human settlements did not understand the maturation cycle which I talked about earlier. They didn't understand that the young people have a constructed self that is shaped by the surrounding environment, and they cannot stand the idealism in which they are required to enact their lives. They want the Gucci, right? They want the bright lights. That's the problem. Okay, so now because in those days I think those idealists did not understand that. Same thing happened in China. They didn't understand that. In India, they try to keep that down, right? But in Israel, they tried to change it, but it failed. So the kibbutz eventually became not abandoned. They became commercialized. Whereas in the beginning, it was an ideal kind of socialist self-help, self-organizing, local political. It was direct democracy.
And actually, I mean, if I were to just dive back, because you brought it up about this younger generation likes their Prada, the Gucci, the bright lights, right? How would you then change the design philosophy around communities or building with that in mind?
Yeah, so my idea of rural urbanization came out of all these kind of experiences and rethinking about the failure of idealistic human settlement ideas, that you must offer viable choice. It cannot be a no choice situation. So in my big picture about what kind of urbanization for the future of the world, rural settlements are very crucial. And I think Jack totally agrees with me on this, where you need to have organized and economically viable human settlements in the villages. But the young people don't want it. They want to go to the bright lights of the city. And so they should. That's my point. So the role of the big city has only got 5 functions left. All production can be decentralized, particularly with e-commerce and with internet. And as long as you have good roads, you can decentralize everything.
And drones now.
The production can be decentralized. So the only functions left for the big city is 1, to be the center for the highest level of medical research and treatment. To be the center for the highest level of scientific and academic research and teaching. So all the young fellas will come, see. To be the center for the highest level of finance and strategic administration. Number 4, to be the center for the highest level of logistics and transportation management. And number 5, to be the center for the highest level of media production. Okay. These 5 naturally benefit from young people. So the future of the big city is the old people who will tend to move out to the rural urban settlements, where they have a nice environment, clean air, clean food, good community cohesion, live close to nature, a slower pace of life. The young people will go to big cities for all those 5 things that the city offers. And when they get married and have children, they will move back to the countryside to raise their children, because they don't want their children to be raised in hectic conditions. So this is the natural ebb and flow of the human settlement of the future, which I am promoting and I'm pushing for.
And which of the countries or which of the cities do you think are a good example, maybe not perfect, of this concept you're talking about?
Okay. Whilst I define the broad parameters of this this form of urbanization, e-commerce, the impact of e-commerce is now actually making it happen. My PhD student in China did his PhD in China on a small village, and he actually initiated the e-commerce development of that village by simply buying a computer, a laptop, and giving it to the local 60-year-old shopkeeper, village shopkeeper. And he taught him how to use it. And because of that, the shopkeeper has now hugely successful financially, and also the whole village. Why? Because he could sell the village produce direct to the nearest town, which is about 100 kilometers away, at urban prices, which he could not get in the village. So a pomelo of 1 renminbi is now sold for 10 renminbi. So what's happening now is that there's a reverse flow. Young people, graduates from universities in China, higher education, not able to get jobs because of the economic downturn in the big cities, are moving into the small towns and villages to start businesses in the small towns and villages. So rural urbanization is happening because of circumstances, right? So I'm optimistic that my theory of decentralized urbanization will happen.
And it doesn't need to have any push, because it actually have already naturally, because of e-commerce, it's happening right now.
But the tragedy is this: when the villagers get rich, what do? They build monster houses.
Okay.
You see, because they live within this overall media space, which promotes, you see, this kind of excessive consumption. Okay, so this is where the human condition has to be considered, right? What is it that will shift the human consciousness away from its addiction to media generated images? Okay, so here is where you see one thing leads to another. Here is where I chance upon the thinking of a very important contemporary philosopher called Nancy Fraser. She's a political scientist and a political philosopher, where she says that there should be a triple movement between there's a third pole in the twin poles of social economic development. Marketization has to be balanced, the double movement balance between marketization and social protection. And that is what the Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee generation did in early Singapore. Marketization and social protection. But the third pole was missing: emancipation. Without emancipation, the forces of of marketization will override the impact of marketization on social protection will produce aberrant and toxic consumption patterns
And
because the third pole is missing.
how do we define emancipation?
Emancipation. Okay. Emancipation is the what we talked about earlier, right? The process by which the maturation of society is enabled.
Okay.
Okay. Bearing in mind the inherent difficulties of that. So Nancy Fraser's point is that the three poles will produce what she calls a triple movement.
So what's missing?
But it's more than triple movement because it's 3 to the power of 3. Because every relationship, right?
Builds on each other.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's very complex.
And how does I think we're lacking now is the emancipation,
right?
which
So,
is
so in Singapore right now,
maturity of the
Yeah.
consciousness.
right? The issue in Singapore is actually the reduction of fear through the democratization of decision making and public participation. Without public participation, you cannot emancipate. Okay? So, what has happened in some of the villages in China now, because of the horrors of monster houses being built, they have formed their own village planning committee.
Would I be, if I were to Google monster houses,
Yeah.
would I see some?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a term that someone came up.
No, I mean, it's a
Big houses,
pejorative. It's a
based.
yeah.
Okay.
So they have formed their own village committee
Yeah.
to do town planning.
Okay.
And they say that no house shall be more than 3-story high.
Fantastic.
Right? That's emancipation because of political democratic participation.
And okay, I get you there. Are there any other notable lessons that you have learned among your travels? So you left off at Jordan.
Yeah. Then of course I went to Egypt and of course look at pyramids and all that.
Were you fascinated by the pyramids?
Disappointed.
Were you disappointed? Why is that so?
I tell you why. It's a very strange thing.
You were at Giza.
Yeah.
Okay.
From a distance they look huge.
Okay.
But as you get closer they look smaller.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because of the angle of vision, right? When you stand at the base of the pyramid, it looks very short.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So that's a perceptual phenomenon that you never read about.
And I've never been, so I need to go.
Any other books, you never hear this being discussed. Okay. Anyway, from there I went to
So you were sad about the pyramids, then you left.
Athens, where I had a very interesting time there. Joined a conference by Doxiadis, who was a very important urban planning philosopher, architect, but he's a planner. He built Islamabad, for example, right? He designed Islamabad, and he formed a group called a concept called ekistics, which is a Greek word. Ekos is a dwelling or environment, right?
Okay.
So the science of human settlements is the term he coined called ekistics, right? Yeah, and it's a worldwide movement, still present. I'm a fellow of the member of the ekistics movement. Yeah.
I-K?
E-K
Oh, E-K.
ISTICS. Yeah.
Link it up.
So he worked out a whole methodology, a system of thinking at the different scales, from micro to macro, at the different categories of spatial forms, and how the different components interact with each other. Very nice thinking. So that was my first encounter
And you enjoy.
with that. I enjoyed it a lot, and I had a big argument with him
Again.
Yeah, where I said in your five components, interactive 5 components, you miss out the 6th one, which is politics. How can you talk about the relationship of all these components, right? Which is, transport, buildings, networks, economics, and so on, but no politics? So he said to me, young man, you go back to Asia, where you came from, and start Equistics Asia with politics.
Oh, okay.
Which,
So he agree to disagree.
But he agreed, but he doesn't want to implement.
Right. He wants you to do a case study first, and
no,
then
no. He
maybe.
wanted me to implement it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I try to do that.
Right. And actually, you when in our conversation before, you brought up the relationship, the important relationship of politics with architecture actually,
Yeah.
and maybe you want to just sort of like paint us a picture of that relationship.
The useful operative way to think about politics has been defined by a very conservative American political scientist called Harold Laswell, who said, politics is the process by which it is decided who gets what, when, and how. That's very precise.
Who gets what, when and how.
Right.
So the
Right.
distribution of resources
That's right.
with a time.
Right. So
constraint.
let's apply that to Singapore. Who gets what? Middle class gets what? And the upper class. The poor don't get much.
Okay.
When? Now. The poor later. How? Through handouts. The poor. Okay? For the rest, for the middle class, how? Housing as asset receptacle.
Okay. What,
And how? Shut up.
for the
Obey what you are told.
Okay.
That's how you're going to get your benefits.
Okay.
So it's very clear. Harold Laswell is absolutely clear. That's politics, right? So if you don't understand that, you don't understand anything.
And that relationship with architecture?
Yeah, so you get, what do you get in Singapore? You get your public housing, right? And if you are really wealthy enough, you get your good class bungalow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whose asset value increases tremendously because you bring in the big bucks from all over the world to buy up the houses here, which pushes the price up. How does it push the price up? Through tendering. And then what the state gets out of it? Property tax, land value enhancement, for which the state owns 80% of the land. So the state benefits.
Yeah.
Which the state uses for handouts.
To the poor.
To the poor as well as
the middle, everybody.
Whatever lah.
Okay.
Right. So you get your passion card for the old.
Okay.
So on specifically on architecture, bring in foreign architects.
Okay, bring star architects. They call it,
Star
right?
architects.
Right.
Right.
The term, yeah.
To build fancy buildings in Singapore. Why? To glorify the state, so that the image of Singapore in relation to the West is that you are the most progressive Asian country, and the image to the West, to the East, is that you are the most advanced of the East Asian countries. So that gives Singapore a prestige, a brand name, from which Singapore can then begin to export. One of its major exports would be urban systems. So we're going to build new towns all over India, China, wherever, right? Because the architecture of Singapore is its emblem.
What's this?
Emblem of
Evidence of
evidence of success.
yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, local architects all dying,
Eating potatoes.
eating, no, I don't know, potatoes. Maybe roti prata.
Roti prata. All right. Yeah, no. I mean, I guess my angle was that, you know, like knowing politics as what you put it, like how then can one architect use it to their as a tool in a toolkit to be successful or to change the world or to change the nation.
Oh, so all the big four,
Oh,
the big four architectural firms, right, are all on very good friendly terms with the politics, right? So they are regarded by foreign investors as reliable. They have an inside track. We don't know exactly what the inside track is made of.
what do you mean
But-
by inside track?
They know people, right?
Oh, okay. A relationship. Yeah.
Relationship, right?
Okay.
Which would be beneficial in some way, which we don't know, but we can count on it.
All right.
So the big four benefit from their close association with the powers that be. That's how architecture is affected by politics directly.
Yeah. Actually, now that we move into politics, I have so much question to ask you, but I'm just going to cut short a little bit. I think we might need to do a round 2 on this.
I think we have to stop here. I have to go.
Yeah, but let me just bring out one last question, because when I asked you about your proudest moment in your life, and you told me that you're being invited by our late PM Lee Kuan Yew to go to his office, and then having an argument at the office. So would you want to tell me a little bit about that day and how it came to be?
I wouldn't say that's the proudest day of my life, Mick.
One of the.
I could just as well say it was the most disastrous day of my life. Yeah.
What happened there?
What happened is that I had written an essay called Housing Identity and Nation Building, where I proposed that for nation building, we have to build our housing in such a way that people identify with it. And by identifying with where they live, they would then identify with the nation. I mean, he liked the idea. So anyway, a copy of that essay was sent to him by George Thompson. George Thompson was the director of Political Studies Center. One of Lee Kuan Yew's confidant, a Fabian socialist, a good friend of mine. So he read the paper and then called me up to meet him to discuss the paper, which I did. There was a funny prelude to it.
You went to the Istana.
No,
Oh,
his office was on the second floor of the city hall in those days. And if you looked at the facade of City Hall, you will see that there's one window there that has got a stainless steel frame around it, which is different from all the rest. That is the frame for the bulletproof glass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Is it still there now?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah,
no.
okay.
Yeah. So I went there, and then there was a little waiting area.
Yeah.
His personal private secretary sits there. There's a aquarium, fish aquarium
Oh,
between where I sat on a chair like
okay.
this, and the PBS was there behind that thing, right?
okay.
Very Spartan.
Right. A lot of fish in the aquarium.
Yeah, aquarium. So waited for quite a while. The man was busy, and then there was an ashtray in front of the coffee table. There was an ashtray
Oh, okay.
with a cigarette butt in it. I noticed it. Yeah, but before that, as I came in, Sankaran, the name of the PPS, said, Mr. Lee would appreciate if you did not smoke in his presence. I said, yeah, I don't smoke. So I sat down, noticed the butt. After a while, Sankaran came in, he saw the butt. He said, I thought I told you not to smoke. Which really got me irate. I said to him, if you don't know how to housekeep and clean your ashtrays, right, don't put the blame on me. He turned on his heel and left in a huff. So that was my prelude to my meeting with the great man,
Wow. Sankaran is the PA, no?
PA.
Oh, the PA, Sankaran. Okay.
I don't know where he's in now.
Okay.
Then after a while, he came in again. Sankaran said, yeah, you please go in now. He will see you. So I went in. I was very surprised. He was wearing white shirt, short sleeve, white pants. His face, his arms was all red,
Oh, red.
drinking.
Ah. Okay.
This was late morning.
Late morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not sunburn? No.
I don't know.
Okay, maybe sunburn. But all red, yes.
Very
Okay.
red, yeah.
Okay.
Which were very striking.
Yeah.
So I asked, he said, yeah, I read your paper, very interesting, Then he said, somewhere in your paper you talked about preserving the Malay kampongs. I totally disagree. He said, there's a den of iniquity, backward.
Den of iniquity.
Yeah, a biblical phrase. Backward, and we must get rid of all of them.
What was his argument?
Because it's backward,
Okay.
you see. So I disagreed with him. I said, no, it's a Gotong Royong spirit we must preserve for our future and so on, right? The kampong culture and all that. After half an hour of back and forth, he suddenly stood up and says, no, I have to go.
Okay.
So that was it. That was my meeting with him. And then,
Then the PA came in and asked you to leave.
no, of course, I came out and then I walked off, right?
Okay. Oh, okay.
Then a week later, George Thompson called me. Said, the man wants you to join the party and stand for election. Because he wants an architect in cabinet.
Oh.
I was 28 years old. But even then I sensed that I cannot, that I'm temperamentally unsuitable. I cannot subject myself to party discipline. I'm a free mind, I cannot tahan this kind of thing, So I wrote back to him and said no. Yeah.
So you type a letter to you, and you type back and say,
No, he didn't type a letter to me.
Oh no.
I told George, no, I'm not going to do this, I can't. And I left it at that. A couple of years later, Spur members began to say that they began to resign from Spur. All the academic members started to resign. And the reason they gave was that they were told by the government that if you continue to be a member of Spur, you will not get any help in your research projects. No information will be accorded to you. I was very angry. I was president of Spur. So I wrote him a long letter that this is unacceptable, this is bad. Don't do it. That was that. So years later, I asked George, so what did he say? He thought the less of you. That was it.
Oh wow! Would you even consider, because it was a privileged position
Yeah.
that you were being offered at a very young age, at
Yeah.
28.
Yeah.
What were some of the conversation that lead you up to making that decision? In your mind, I mean.
No, very clear. I cannot be his henchman. I cannot be a yes man, right? It's very clear he wants a yes man. That's his nature. But that's not my nature. So, tak boleh jalan.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you so
Okay.
much for your time.
All
We're
right.
definitely going to do a round 2. I barely only finished page 1 and it's already 2 hours.
What's up, people? It's over.
As usual, all show notes, links, books can be found on our website, brianvictor.com, Brian for Y. And if you have any misfits you'd like to hear from, feel free to drop me an email. Thank you again for giving me your precious time to listen to this episode. And if you're hearing a lot of shouting around the back end, that's just because there's little kids running around over here, and parents telling their kids how amazing they are, and they certainly truly are amazing. Yeah, and that's it. Signing off. Have a fantastic week ahead.